That was stupid.
I know it was stupid.
Really stupid.
Hey, I just said it was stupid.
Today's Daily Dose of Stupid, we've actually already hinted at it a little bit because it was one of the stories that got censored the other day on Facebook. Veggie Tales apparently is teaching racism. Now, this is something that I find very important because I didn't know that when I was watching Veggie Tales that I was actually being taught racism, which is a big problem, because if you've got little kids learning racism, that's an issue. So what happened the other day is there was this Whiteness Forum at Cal State San Marcos, which, by the way, the whole idea of a Whiteness Forum seems pretty racist to me. I mean, for example, let's do the old flip over and see if that would play out well if it were the other way around. Can you imagine if a predominantly white school had a Blackness Forum? And it was a bunch of white people getting together to talk about black people. Heck, if it was a bunch of black people getting together to talk about black people, that to me would seem pretty racist too. So it's hilarious to me that they're getting together to talk about race, despite the fact of the very name of their event seeming pretty racist. But anyway, there's this 2-hour event on campus that they did, which took digs at things like the NFL and white women for perpetuating the patriarchy and all this other crazy stuff. And then at one point, they went after Veggie Tales for furthering racism, according to them. Now, I know what you're thinking here, but Caleb, all the characters in Veggie Tales are vegetables. They're like green and red and blue and all kinds of other crazy colors. They don't have a race. They're vegetables. Well, see, the problem with that is you are using logic and reason. And you're thinking like a logical, reasonable person that has rational thought. And you cannot understand leftist thinking doing that. And so what you have to do is you have to dive into their mode of thinking, which is let's just be offended at everything and look for things to be offended by constantly. So once you understand that, it makes a lot more sense. And to prove my point, here's some of the quotes from the event. Quote, "The Christian cartoon Veggie Tales is racist because all of the villains are vegetables of color." Well, like I said, they're all vegetables of color. They're green and red and blue and all those other things. They continue on. When kids see the good white characters, there are no white characters in Veggie Tales. When kids see the good white character triumph over the bad person of color character, they are taught that white is right and minorities are the source of evil. Wow, they've busted this thing wide open. Veggie Tales has been on a conspiracy this whole time to subtly give kids racist messages. Man, I don't know what they were smoking at the Whiteness Forum, but it has got to be some good stuff if this is the conclusion that they reached. A student that worked on the forum said this via the College Fix, who originally reported the story. "The villains in Veggie Tales have ethnic accents such as Latino, while the heroic characters sound white." Okay, so it's not the actual skin tone, it's the voices, which I kind of doubt that kids are going to be able to pick up on that, especially young kids. They're not going to know the difference a lot of times. But B, I don't know if that's necessarily true. Because let's look back at this, and again, you have to go with what's most probable, not necessarily what you feel in the moment. Do you know why Big Idea Productions, which produces Veggie Tales, has a lot of characters with different ethnic accents? Because they're low budget. Because if you are a company, and I say this as somebody who has done work as a voice actor, this is my job, this is my profession. If you want to have one voice actor for several different characters, they have to make their voice sound different. And so to do that, one of the easiest ways to accomplish that is to do a different ethnic accent. So for example, if I'm working two different characters and I have to make their voices sound different, one of the easiest ways for me to do that is to do one in my regular voice, my American accent, and do another one, for example, that is Russian. If I want to do a Russian voice, that would be the way I differentiate my characters. That would be how you do it. And so because Big Idea doesn't exactly have a huge staff and a lot of production money, they use the same voice actors for a lot of these characters. And that means that a lot of them are going to be using accents to differentiate their characters. And so that being said, even if you take that into consideration, though, let's look through a list of Veggie Tales titles and see if this alleged racism is actually taking place. Now, granted, I'm only going through the earliest years of Veggie Tales just because those are the ones that I was a kid for, thus those are the ones that I remember watching as a child. So let's go through this. Where's God when I'm scared? Okay, in that one, there is one villain that is from Toledo, Ohio. He actually says that he's from Toledo, and he has a very Ohio-sounding accent, which is not an accent at all. That's what it means to be from Ohio. You basically don't get an accent. So a very American-sounding person. The second villain in that one, it would be the wise men in the story of Daniel, who, by the way, have British accents. So an ethnic accent for sure, but British people are white, so not necessarily one that would be subtly teaching kids racism. God wants me to forgive them. Well, the villains in that one is actually a Southern family, so all the bad guys have Southern accents. I don't think that means that Veggie Tales subtly hates Southerners, that they're teaching kids to hate people from the South. Just so happens that the villains in that particular story have Southern accents. Are You My Neighbor? There's not really a bad guy in that one. I don't really think that there's a villain in that particular one. Rack Shack and Benny. Okay, in that one, the bad guy is King Nebuchadnezzar, and he has an American-sounding accent too. Dave and the Giant Pickle. Well, the Giant Pickle named Goliath, because it's the story of David, would be the bad guy, and to my knowledge, the pickle never speaks. I don't think he has a single line in that whole movie. The Toy That Saved Christmas, never saw that one. Larry Boy and the Fib from Outer Space. Okay, in that one, the bad guy is the Fib from Outer Space, and he has sort of a Southern Bronx accent, so he sounds like he's from New York City. Josh and the Big Wall. In this particular one, the bad guys are the French peas sitting on top of the walls of Jericho that are pouring down, again, this is how ridiculous and silly this is, milkshakes on the children of Israel. I mean, it's a children's cartoon. That's how the whole thing works. Madame Blueberry. The bad guys in that one would have British accents because it's the Scallions again. Larry Boy and the Rumor Weed. Well, in this particular one, again, the Rumor Weed has an American-sounding accent. King George and the Ducky. Okay, in that one, the bad guy is actually King George, who represents King David, and that would be Larry the Cucumber, which again has an American accent. Esther, the girl who became queen. In that one, the bad guy is Mr. Lunt. I don't really know what his accent is. It's certainly not ethnic, though, because he's playing Haman in the story of Esther. I don't know what you would call his accent, but it's definitely not foreign. Lyle the Kindly Viking. In that one, again, just a regular American-sounding guy. Sumo of the Opera. Well, the bad guy in that one has a deep voice, but it's certainly not an ethnic accent. Lord of the Beans. In that one, again, the bad guy has a British accent. And then Larry Boy and the Bad Apple. The bad guy in that one actually has it's sort of a cabaret singer kind of style. So when we're looking through that list, that apparently all the villains are vegetables of color, whatever the heck that means, because their voices sound ethnic and all the heroes sound white. We just looked through that list of about 16 movies, and it looks like there were 4 accents out of all the villains, 3 of them British, 1 of them French. Both countries that are predominantly white. So I have no idea where they're getting this. But that is their claim, and apparently they're sticking with it, although there's no truth to it whatsoever. So the real question becomes, why do people think this? Why do people assume that there's something evil or nefarious going on here? Look, if white people like it, there is a certain contingency of the left. I'm not saying all of them, but there is a plurality of people on the left that assume that if a lot of white people like something, it must be racist somehow. And there is mostly the same contingency on the left that believes that if it's Christian or it teaches traditional family values, it's somehow furthering the patriarchy and thus it must be somehow racist in there somewhere. And so there is an assumption of racism for anything that's even remotely connected to Christianity, morality, or Western civilization as a whole. Anything that teaches traditional morals, they are going to assume is racist somehow. And that's the problem that they're running into. Now, among some liberals, there's sort of this self-loathing when it comes to white people. So there's a lot of white liberals that have this sort of guilt, and I don't really understand why, but they do. And because of that, they kind of hate anything that is associated with white people, which Veggie Tales isn't even necessarily doing. I actually know quite a few black kids that went to church, either at my congregation or at other congregations, that love Veggie Tales. It's a completely harmless thing that they've tried to twist into something evil. But there are certain people that unfortunately just look for racism in everything. And if you don't believe me, Barack Obama just a couple of weeks ago was saying the reason that we're not buying more solar panels is because of racism. Now, what was his justification for that? Well, he didn't give one because there is no logic there. But literally, that's what he was saying. He's saying the reason we haven't embraced green energy and we haven't gone to a completely green system is because people are racist. It makes no sense. But I mean, that is proof positive. Both that and the VeggieTales story that there are some people on the left that they just look for racism in absolutely everything. And racism is the reason for every problem or bad thing that has ever happened to them. The thing about that is when you look for something, you tend to find it. And these people are looking for people to be hateful to them and to be racist against them. And because of that, they find it, even when it's not actually there. And for that, I really do feel sorry for them. It's a really crummy way to look at the world and to look at the human race, to look at other people. I genuinely feel sorry for them because of that.